Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook, a podcast for entrepreneurs in the business of sports. Your hosts, Dave Kozak and Steve Cook, are business owners, successful entrepreneurs, sports enthusiasts, avid readers, and longtime friends. For years, they've read every business book on the market and built successful companies with what they've learned. This podcast will give you the critical takeaways in just 15 minutes a week. It's a quick and easy playbook for building a winning sports business. And now, here are your hosts, Dave and Steve.
Looking for small business consulting? Visit ParadigmPlaybook.com to book a session with us. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Paradigm Playbook. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Steve Cook.
Welcome back, David.
Sir. So today, we're gonna take a different spin on things today. I think it's going to be a great conversation. There's an old adage out there that is, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, which I have said on in this podcast in the past is garbage, right? Work is work. It is certainly,
it's hard.
It is hard, right? It's just not.
It's okay, but it's hard. Yeah.
And there is a spin on it that I like to put in there, which is, if you love what you do, you can be very satisfied in your profession and in your work. And that satisfaction is motivating, it is inspiring, and it continues to have you push forward, right? And I think that is what, if you love what you do, I think that's what you get out of loving what you do. And so today we're going to talk about sort of self-awareness as an owner, as a manager, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, all of the things that we discuss. Because in order to be satisfied, Steve, in order to have that love what you do, you've got to set yourself up to for all that to be possible, right? And that comes from self-awareness. If you're not self-aware, I mean, down to what your office is set up like, right? I mean, it's everything
and
you
why.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And I think, we can spin this, we try to stick with the entrepreneurial world, but this is not just pointed at entrepreneurs. This is, if you're a manager, if you're a salesperson, if you're a marketing, if you're an administrator, if you're a husband, if you're a wife, it's being self-aware of whatever within that role. So as we go through this, I think everybody can look at it and say, okay, in my role as a spouse, I'm this. In my role as a manager on this, is in my role as an owner or a coach or a little league coach or wherever it is, self-awareness is important wherever you go.
Yeah. And Steve, everybody knows one of my businesses is in the college admission space. And one of the first things that we talk about with young prospective college students is self-awareness. Like, what do you actually like, right? If you follow the passion towards an education, you're going to be satisfied with the education you receive. A lot of people go and they sort of study because, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, or that's where I'm supposed to go, or that's what I'm supposed to be doing, or I'm supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is, right? But we don't teach a lot of self-awareness necessarily in the education system. And it's funny because you and I, right, are athletes and coach athletes and been there. A lot of self-awareness.
Ex-athletes.
Yeah, well, former. Okay, not ex, okay, former. I'm working out.
Okay.
But
transitioning.
Easy with that.
Okay, sorry.
A lot of where I learned self-awareness was in my athletic career, where, how I would step up to the plate, what made me comfortable when I was a batter, what made me comfortable when I was a pitcher, how I liked my position players to react in good times and bad times, right? That's the self-awareness that I learned. So I got this cool little cheat sheet. And it's basically titled Cultivate Self-Awareness, 7 Key Questions to Understand Yourself. And I apologize for the cell phone, but it does have my cheat sheet on it. So
it's not checking email.
Yeah, I'm not checking emails or distracted. And
can I throw a book in here quick?
Absolutely.
Since we do this every
Always.
week. And this is not a business book per se, but a book written by Coach Jay Wright from Villanova, which I love the book. I'm from Philadelphia, so I'm a Villanova fan.
You didn't happen to send any money to Villanova in your lifetime, did you?
A little bit, but the book's called Attitude, or if you're in Philly, it's attitude.
Attitude.
And that's what, but in the book, Jay, and a lot of coaches have said this, but when they're evaluating incoming recruits, one of the number one things is self-awareness, because it's difficult to take the best of the best from a high school program and say you're going to sit on the bench for 2 years.
Yeah.
And you have to have an awareness. And there's a lot of stories that go around from a lot of different books. The other book is Raise Your Game by Niall's going to tell us who the author is. I'm blanking on the author. But Raise Your Game, he does a whole chapter in that book on self-awareness.
It's huge, and it is a necessary component, period.
You can jump in whenever you get that author's name for us, Niall. That's it. Thank you, Alan Stein. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's
let's go.
I'm going to go through the 7 questions to ask yourself, and then let's talk to each of the questions. All right. So the first one is the core values. What are the principles that guide your decision-making process? The second is influence. What kind of effect do you believe you have on the people around you? The third is the coping mechanisms. How do you typically respond when faced with a challenging or difficult situation? The fourth one is the behavioral patterns. What are the consistent ways you think, feel, and act in various situations? The next one is the ideal fit. In what environment do you find the most satisfaction or contentment? Then you have your aspirations. What goals and experiences do you envision achieving in the future? And then you have your passion points. Which interests light up your excitement to energize you?
And I think if you can, one, answer all those questions on your own, then two, have someone close to you that will give you an honest answer. So this isn't someone that reports to you or answer, this is a wife, a partner, is somehow someone that is going to give you honest answers, and then have a uninvolved, someone who has a distant view of you answer those questions and say, from a distance, he appears to be self-confident. And so your view of how self-confident you are, someone close to you, how self-confident you are, and then what's that vision that they see? And you have to have the awareness of all three of those to know how to react and how to act. And one other thing, and then I'll let you dig into the first one, but I think you need to know about yourself. You need to know what you're good at, what you're bad at, and then what things that you want to work at, and then what things that you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to do that. So you have to walk away from them. Yeah.
So it's funny. I'll tell a little story, a little experience I had. So in business, right, when I started, it was about the money, it was about the setup, it was about trying to be successful and climbing through those pivotal years where, most small businesses fail in the first 5 years, and can you make it through the 5 years? And then, you got the 10-year window, and you're trying to do everything, essentially right, but it's a huge learning process throughout it. And there's this core value that sort of set into me, and it was introduced to me by a different company, and actually a different mentor of mine. And the idea of all those things was the setup and the hard work and all that. It's all necessary, but it was a distraction from what really kind of is my core value, which is to be of service to someone, to enrich the lives of others in every interaction. Right? I'm trying to make someone else better every single day, and in turn, I'm making myself better in doing that. So it's the concept of being of service to people, right? And so, I one of my original core values was do the right thing. Always do the right thing, right? And sometimes the right thing is not easy to do. Sometimes it is the conversation can be very difficult. The ownership of an error you made, or you've got the carrot dangling over here, but that leads you down a path that's not the right thing. So core values to me are be of service, enrich everybody I interact with. So when I'm on a coach on a field, I'm trying to enrich the lives of the kids that I'm coaching. But not only that, it doesn't stop there. I turn to the parents and I try and enrich the lives of the parents, help them be better parents in coaching the sport that I'm teaching, right? And so it's this constant idea of enriching someone else's life, gives me satisfaction, it gives me purpose, and it makes me better every single step of the way. So be of service and enrich someone's lives are the core principles that I use or core values that I have.
And I think you'd agree that the core value of giving back, enriching lives, is what pulled us together with what we're doing right 100%. Here now. So that was we were going through discussions of what we were learning all the time. And the idea is, how could we teach this? How could we share this? And it's become much more of a sharing than a teaching. I don't think that, we want to take lecturing to heart. What we want to do is get in discussions. So it's why we love the feedback so much, is when you get feedback, then the discussion is happening. And maybe that's a little bit selfish on our part, but you like to know that you're having an effect. So when I get the comments on LinkedIn or wherever that say, "Hey, love that episode on unreasonable hospitality," it's like, and by the way, that got a lot of interest, which was a great episode. But that service to others core value is a cornerstone of Paradigm Playbook. That's what we're here for.
I remember when you so if you don't know the history, I'll give it real quick. Steve and I worked at Steve's baseball facility, Grand Slam USA, and I did private coaching, baseball coaching instruction. And we used to talk, and I have one of my employees came from his operation, and I've had many of the people, if they've graduated out of the sort of retail environment and got their degrees, I've hired people out of his organization, and it's been a great relationship. But we used to meet regularly, once a month, once every couple of weeks, and we'd sit down and just have business conversations with one another. And he'd bring a book that he was like, "Dude, you got to read this book," and I'd bring a book, and so here it goes. And we're in this journey of the growth mindset of continuing to move forward and get better. And Steve said, "Listen, I'm looking to retire." And I say retire. He was looking to leave the corporate environment and to pursue a passion project, something that was meant something to him. And he came to me and he said, "Dave, I want to give all of my knowledge to others." And I said, well, wait a minute. Like, I'm cool with that. However, if you can give knowledge and make money, that's reasonable too, right? You don't have to just give it away and do it. So our compromise in this is we do have consulting and we do all that, but this is our pathway to give the knowledge back to others. And so at the onset, as soon as he said, I want to give it back, I'm going, yeah, well, man, let's do it. Let's get there. It's an inspiring thing because it struck my core value. And so in a self-awareness conversation, his comment to me, he wants to give it. So do I. I want to put it out there. And it just was inspiring. And here we are, 80 episodes later and with clients across the country. And it's like, hey, the giving principle works, right?
I'm going to share a story that I haven't told Dave yet because I just got this today. As a matter of fact, I got an email from a psychoanalyst that runs a private practice. And he said,
"You're crazy?"
No, he said, "I need to come on your podcast as a guest." And he says, "And you guys are cornering yourselves into the sports world, and everything you're saying applies to my business." He runs, several offices for what he does. He's a doctor, and we never set out to limit this to sports. It's just what we know very well.
Yeah.
So it's we build it around sports, but the self-awareness includes knowing that you have knowledge that you can share outside of the sports world. I'm most confident in the sports world. And one of my awareness things is I'm a little bit intimidated if I were to sit down in a meeting and do a webinar for attorneys. Mm-hmm. I don't have the confidence, yet I'm very confident in a room full of entrepreneurs running sports facilities. It's kind of my world.
Well, it's funny too, because what Steve and I bring to the table is we both have the sports background, and there's so many lessons in athletics, and then going from being an athlete to teaching athletes and inspiring young people to be the best they can be. But what I bring to the table is the opposite of that, right? I've moved away from sports. My professional career doesn't involve sports anymore. And I'm in the insurance financial services industry. I have a business that helps students apply and get into different colleges across the country. And it's all encompassing, but I try and bring that perspective to these conversations of, well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, self-awareness is about personal development. It's about business success. It's about athletic success. It's about all these things. And so that's an awesome little tidbit that a doctor gave you.
Yeah. And just being aware of your position and what you're good at, and, some of your shortcomings is important. And then also, self-awareness includes, what's your plan for improving that? How are you going to get better? What are you going to do that's going to change that? And who's going to hold you accountable to that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. So again, what are your core values? What really drives you? And, my lessons learned from coaching in a paid environment, Steve, to now coaching in a non-paid environment, right? I coach all my kids' teams and everything because, again, I'm a coach at heart. I coach my staff and my employees, and so in that model, I've realized that finding and creating ways for others to bring out the best in themselves is the most rewarding thing that I do. So if I can find a employee that wants more and wants better, and I can help them get there, that's where I find my satisfaction. So it just aligns with the core value. And that's a lesson learned through coaching my own kids, because watching them succeed and watching their teammates succeed, it brings that satisfaction.
And understanding that, I know passions was one of your 7 keys. Having that as one of your passions and identifying it, then you will schedule yourself around availability to pursue that passion. So you're not going to, those that grow up in a business and keep pulling themselves totally away from what they're passionate about, they're missing something. I was able to shift my passion for the specifics of a sport to the benefit of all sport, and therefore the passion of the sports business. So I had a full shift, so I can step away from coaching, but those that retain that as a passion need to keep that in their wheelhouse.
Yeah. So I think it goes to the next one, and I'm probably going in reverse order here, Steve.
That's okay. I think it's a circle.
Influence. It is. Okay. You know what? This guy. I'll let that one go.
Where's the end of a circle?
Dig it, fella.
Let's go.
So what kind of effect do you believe you have on the people around you? So this is an interesting subject matter, because oftentimes what you believe you have, if you are not self-aware and you're not asking, you may have a different opinion of how you affect people. And I learned this lesson the hard way in employees that left, not in the employees that stayed. But over time, there was this quote that I read, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. It said, "Never force a loyal person to no longer care." And, I had a habit of when I got so disappointed in someone's production outcome, willingness to grow, things like that, that I just stopped caring about them, and they died on the vine, right? Rotten tomatoes. And what transitioned in the last probably 5 years of my career is the power of influence and the power of the positive reinforcement versus the yelling, hollering, and screaming about the negatives, and sort of that baseball mentality. And I'll explain the baseball mentality. Baseball in general is a game of failure, right? You fail far more than you succeed in baseball. And it's the only sport where if you succeed 30% of the time when you're at the plate, you could be a Hall of Famer, right?
Yep.
And so 7 out of times you come up to the plate, or 7 out of 10 times you come up to the plate, you're going to be an out, right? But those 3 times are the ones that matter. And so what I've really learned in coaching youth sports is bringing that same mentality of the failures are where you learn, and you gotta, it's not how many times you get knocked down in the Rocky context, it's how many times you get back up. And so my influence has shifted. My influence used to be more rah-rah gung-ho, and then I'd get really down. And I'd be like, oh man, why would you do that? That's the dumb, I would never do that in that meeting, or that was the stupidest way to handle that situation. Like what? And what I realized is, in me doing that, my criticism of the other individual just sunk the confidence. And Steve, if you go back to your comment about being in front of lawyers, right? If I spike you up enough and I give you the support that you need, and you stand in front of a group of attorneys and you knock it out of the park because you had the support of people around you and the influence, the next time you don't have that same problem. And so what I've realized in my influence is identify what went wrong, teach how to not let it happen again, and then, hey, get back out there, go get it, right?
Yeah, and I think the number one way that you influence others is through performance. It's what you do, and we see this in sports all the time. Here in Philadelphia, we had a ball player, Chase Utley, was Chase Utley, the man, had a famous comment after winning the World Series. But anyway, he wasn't a guy who was out telling the other players what to do. But he was an influence on everyone. I remember when another player came up to it and he says, I see what Chase does. I'm just going to be here 10 minutes before Chase does, and
I'll be successful.
Yeah, so he shows up at 6 o'clock the next morning for a 10 o'clock practice, and Chase is already there in a full sweat. He says, okay, so I have to do things differently. That's an influence.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
an influence. If Chase had said, listen, you have to be here at 6 o'clock, and then he showed up at 8, that's also an influence, but not the words were the influence. It's the action.
Do you want your business to thrive? Visit us at paradigmplaybook.com and contact us today for an expert assistance. Correct. And so I'll relate it to something that I'm in the middle of, right? So I was an athlete, and as many athletes do, when you stop athletics, you go to something else. And I sat behind a desk for a lot of years and sort of let myself get out of shape and, put on some LBs and was puffing up. All of a sudden I have 4 kids, and I'm out there telling the kids how to take care of their bodies and to how to run the bases and, whatever it was, no matter the sport. And then I'm coming home and I'm sitting on the couch watching TV or going down to my desk and working and not taking care of my own body. And so again, somewhere along the way, I learned about modeling parental behavior. Modeling the behavior you want to see in your kids is the best way to do it. There's lessons that have been proven out. How you treat your spouse is if you have daughters, how you treat your spouse is what your kids will come to accept is how they should be treated if they're a female. So if you treat your spouse poorly, then your child's going to accept that as that's okay. And then they're going to allow others to treat them that way as they age. And so started this modeling concept in my own house and I treat my wife like a queen because she is, but the working my own body and taking care of myself to show my kids, I get up at 6:30. Do you know, I hate getting up at 6:30. I hate getting up at 6, but I do it, right? It's the modeling of it. So again, influence and leadership are really dependent on showing up and doing what you tell others they need to do to be successful, right?
Yes, and it doesn't hurt to ask or find out what other people think. It's like if you do your assessment, and a self-awareness assessment isn't something that you do once a year and put in the drawer.
It's constant.
It's every day. It's like
evolution, a consistent evolution.
At the end of the day, how did I do today? Was I influencing people? Was I aware of what I'm doing? Did I, lead with passion? All those things become part of an everyday evaluation of your own self-awareness.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so the next one is coping mechanisms. How do you typically respond when faced with challenging and difficult situations? I am a juggernaut in this world, Steve. I take it all in stride. I've got the relentless solution focus mindset every step of the way. I get spiked left, right, up and down all day, every day. it doesn't really get me worked up. It just doesn't. I don't know if I don't have that cortisol release. I don't know if it just like I've been through enough experiences where, okay, whoa, I've heard the situation. Let's throttle back a little bit. Let's figure out what we're going to do to make it better right now. From being served papers and lawsuits to like having employees quit on the spot to having to fire someone to like something going terribly wrong in a business environment or a negotiation going south or somebody doesn't show up to work and didn't say anything about it. Like all that stuff can send people into an absolute tizzy, right? But how do you deal when those things happen? And I don't think we need to go any further than if you have a coping mechanism issue, you need to read and practice Relentless Solution Focus.
Yeah, it's one of our favorite books that we bring up almost every podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to.
You will get to the point where you will embrace the challenge. And when you think about it, as ex-athletes, part of why we do that and part of why you're working out now and the excitement in the current workout is there's a new challenge out there. There's a new something I have to solve. And that's how I look at reading too. And
how about writing? Steve, writing a book, right?
It's like I'm sitting down to write a book and I know that I'm not great at spelling. I'm not great at grammar. I'm not great at sentence structure. So I guess I'm not a great writer, and yet I'm going to...
But read the book.
Yeah, but I've got these ideas. So in order to do it right is I went out and hired a ghostwriter, and 100%. Every day I take the criticism. So I'm getting outside opinions, and he'll say, stop using this word. You've used this word for, it's like kids now. It's like, how was school? School was awesome. How was lunch? Lunch was awesome. How'd you do on your test? Awesome. You wonder what's going to happen in life when they really come across something that is awesome. Yeah. What's the word? There's no word left, but you have to be self-aware of where you are and know what you're going to face. So right now I'm working on the writing thing. I worked on reading. I wasn't a reader. But being aware and all those things come together and help you grow in the entrepreneurial world as a leader.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to behavioral patterns. What are the consistent ways you think, feel, and act in various situations? I'm going to give you, I have a thing that we use again. I wish I knew where I picked up the concept of attitude anchors, but I preach it every day to every athlete I've ever trained, which is you can control your attitude and your effort. Those are the two things that are within your control. Everything else is it's shrapnel. It's out there. It's in the periphery. You can control your attitude and effort. So in a behavioral pattern, if you sink too low or you get too high, right? If you take the highs and you get really high and you take the lows and you get really low, you're not able to maintain that consistency. So I think the idea in my behavioral pattern is, and listen, don't get me wrong, there are days when I struggle. Everybody struggles. That's not an uncommon thing, especially in the roller coaster of entrepreneurship, right? But how quickly can you get yourself out of the funk, if you will, right? So I use attitude anchors. Those are simple thoughts that you can anchor yourself to in the moment to pull you out of a tough situation or to ground you, right? I'll give you an example that I use. So I lost a really big deal. Like it was a really big deal. It would have been for our company, it would have been probably the biggest financial deal that we ever had. And I was pretty bummed out about it because I thought I put in an incredible amount of work, time, and effort into creating this plan. It was a multi-family, multi-generational financial plan. It would have been a great win. And I never forgot that feeling. I didn't let myself get too down on it, right? Because the next week I closed what was arguably the biggest deal. It was a different plan and it was awesome. But what I do sometimes when you close those big deals, you get so jazzed up and so jacked up that your behavioral pattern is up and down. And so when I close a big deal and when I, make a great payday for the organization, I always remember the one that I lost to just little humble pie. Hey, dude, well done. Next one's coming. Don't forget you did lose one that would have been a blockbuster deal. And so I think the little celebrations are good when you win that. Yep.
but you don't want to get hung up on that. So one of the first people I ever started listening to was Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins has done a zillion things and probably the number one motivational speaker in the world, bar none. But the first thing I learned from him, he called neuro-linguistic programming. And that was something that he learned that he built his career on. And the idea, it says that what you say and repeat to yourself often enough, you're going to learn to accept. So it all starts with, is your attitude, why me? Everything happens to me. Or how lucky am I? I get to solve this. Mm-hmm. And okay, I'm set up to be the hero. How lucky am I? So I don't know. That has always stuck with me. It was one of those first videotapes. And Tony said, if you just lock on to how lucky am I? And, when I look back, my life, and I just told Dave, one of my next books I'm going to write is centered around all my failures. But with every one is, how lucky am I that I learned that lesson without it killing my career?
Yeah, no doubt.
I've had setbacks, but not tremendous setbacks, not anything that was, earth shattering. So really, how lucky am I?
Well, Steve, it's incredible. And I'll go back to my corporate career. How lucky was I to get fired?
Yeah.
I was pretty lucky, right?
Yeah,
because here I am today.
It's hard to say it at the time.
Yeah.
But you have to look at that. But and maybe the first step is to get off of, why is everything happening to me? And there's this, was it negative mindset? No, it's,
static.
No, what does Jason Selk call
I'll get it.
Problem-centric thinking.
Yep. PCT.
Yes. Jason Selk wrote RSF.
Which is relentless solution focus. We're throwing out all the acronyms now.
Yeah. So, but he said everybody by nature lives in this negative state, this problem-centric thinking. And the key is to get out of it as fast as you can. He gives you 60 seconds. And I'll tell you, it's so much fun to the point where you can be really annoying to others.
Yeah.
And I've done that where I've annoyed. Now, how can you be happy right now? I said, I got a solution.
My wife hates me for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be careful when you use it.
Yeah, correct. Lessons learned, right? All right. So the next thing is the ideal fit. And this is critical because I think this is one that's just glossed over for people, right? In what environment do you find the most satisfaction and contentment, right? And, it's different for everybody. But if you set yourself up in business to never be in that environment, that is a tough thing to overcome, right? So, and I take this down, I get granular with this. What does my office look like? Do I get sun? Do I not get sun? Should I put desk lamps versus overheads? That's pure environment, right? But then am I in a lot of coaching situations? Am I in a lot of teaching situations, or am I in a lot of doing situations? Am I being a technician, manager, coach, entrepreneur? And so I think it's just something you absolutely have to think about. And there was a point when I would host what I call my first meeting with clients. And when I went to college, my mom handed me a CD. That dates me, so at least it wasn't an 8-track, right, Steve? But she handed me a CD, and it was Better Thinking Through Mozart was the CD. And when I studied, I used to put on Mozart because there was some psychological study done where Mozart it stimulates brain activity, right? The sound, and so you can go back. There's studies on babies and all that, right? Yeah. So when I started my first meetings, I would have Mozart playing softly in the background, right? That was an environment where I was actively thinking. I thought, hey, if I'm actively thinking, and maybe at that time I was programmed that Mozart turned my brain on, but the client would be thinking, and I'd get them in that environment. So I've gotten down in the rabbit hole of that. Now I've gotten away from the Mozart. Should I bring it back? Probably. Amount of things,
interesting.
The amount of things that you do in your lifetime that you stop doing and you don't know why you stopped doing them is bizarre when you get some experience. You'll look back and go, even in our business structure, right? We had processes to do certain things. And I don't know if we never valued the process, but It just sort of faded away. Didn't do it.
Right.
And now we're going, well, what was different then? And you're going, oh, we did this, this, and this. And you're like, well, let's do that again.
And some of those things, and I think there's things that you have to lean into and, kind of, as they say, get over your skis a little bit on it. And there's things that you have to step away from. I'll give a story quickly that something that I'm not as good at. And for years, I thought I was great at, and that is reading people. I thought, I see that, I know, that person's a good person. That I got burned a few times on that. And, it's interesting because my wife and my son, who are both involved in my businesses, would always come back and said, I could have told you that on that guy. I could have told you that.
Saw that coming.
Yeah. They have a much better read on people and they can dig in. I'm maybe the over the top optimist, and I can,
you find the good, whether it's there or
I can
not.
find good in a serial murderer.
Right.
So it's like I find that person and say, oh, okay, yeah, but he's got a good sense of humor. That's so anyway. But so there's certain things I get, like at our business at Grand Slam. I don't hire anybody. I am not the one that hires anybody. And my son, who does, rarely makes a mistake. Doesn't mean he never makes a mistake, but rarely makes a mistake. So it's just that self-awareness again. We're circling this whole thing. Self-awareness to step into or step away from things.
Yeah, we're gonna hit the last two, and we gotta wrap it up here. We're going a little long today. I apologize, but I think it's very important. Next one is aspirations. What goals and experiences do you envision achieving in the future? We've talked specifically about goals, Steve, in different podcasts. They are the targets that, if they're not set, you wander around and you're not, what are you working towards if you don't have a goal, right? And the goal doesn't have to be like, I want to be a billionaire, right? It can be, I want to give back. I want to teach.
Exactly. It can be anything. And I firmly believe that if you stay aligned with your aspirations and your core values, which is where you started, if you keep those two things in line, then good will come to you.
Yep.
And it's the reason I can say how lucky am I, because I keep doing this. And I mean, look at the opportunities that we've gotten just because we started a free podcast. And people, you could help me with this, could you? And boom, we're involved in another business.
Yep.
It's
100%.
Great stuff.
And then the last one are the passion points. And this is, this is the ultimate attitude anchor in my opinion, right? This is the one where I lost sight of it for 15 years. There's no doubt. In building my businesses, my initial, maybe 10 years, I lost sight of it. But which interests light up your excitement and energize you? And Steve, I got to go back to you here, because when we sat down one of the first times, and maybe it wasn't one of the first times, but you asked me a question about how I met Matt, my business partner, 15 years. How did I meet him? And I said, baseball. And I continued. I said, you know how I met my wife, Steve? Baseball. You know how I met my friend, Steve? Baseball. And you know how I expanded my business relationships? Baseball. Right? So everything in my world goes back to baseball, but that was my culture and my environment and what I did. And when I stopped coaching baseball, I lost some of that. Right. And it sort of was like my passion is in teaching youth sports, specifically baseball, now softball, but I'll coach soccer, I'll coach basketball. Like I'm a consummate coach, right? Luckily for me, that pause was only a couple of years because I had my own kids, and then I got back into it. And again, now the networking components of coaching youth sports and the being on the boards and doing the volunteerism and all of the stuff that's associated with it, I'm right back in the saddle with that. And so my coaching interests, my coaching passion is my interest, to the point, Steve, where I've said, man, if I'm done here, I will apply for a job as a head coach at a college, or I'll go into coaching, or maybe I'll open up a facility or something. Like I would do that. Right now, I'm also a realist, and my desire to coach baseball every single night from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. and all weekend is not there. It's there now because they're my kids, right? I don't know that I would want to do it. And so that's where I sort of thought of it. But the passion is the key part there. Baseball keeps me grounded. Coaching kids keeps me grounded. It makes me a better employer. It makes me a better boss. It makes me a better leader.
And I'll circle this whole thing up and tell you that, it's interesting that we end with passion, because I tell everybody when they ask, what are you doing at Paradigm Playbook? And, and I, on a daily basis, I'm trying to get people to use the passion they have for sports to develop a passion for business. And so you'd say you took a hiatus from baseball, but you didn't. You stopped learning it and you started applying it. So your, atomic habits you learned from baseball, your leadership you learned from baseball, your work ethic you learned from baseball, and you applied it at Paradigm Financial, or Elite Collegiate Planning, all those things. And that's what you're trying to teach now. So I don't think that baseball passion has either left you or gone to waste at any time. I think you're just using it differently.
I agree. And I'll tell one last funny story because it's awesome. My dad, love him. He's the man. He really is a cool dude. He used to tell everybody that my athletic career peaked when I was 6 years old, right? and now I played college baseball, so I would argue that it didn't, but whatever. And I was a swimmer, and he said we went down to this swim meet in Lancaster. I was 6 years old, and I was the fastest kid in the arena by tenfold. It was a championship meet, and I walked out of there, and I had 6 trophies in my arms, and they were all this back when the 80s when they gave you big trophies, right? Yeah. And we laugh about it, and I have a different perspective on it. And while my athletic career, my actual performance on the field may have peaked at some point in my 20s, my willingness to be disciplined, to work hard, and to gain didn't even start until I was in my 30s. Yeah. And so now I've taken that and I've applied, and I'm glad, because I haven't peaked yet. I don't know that I'm going to peak, Steve, but the idea here is that I'm glad I didn't peak as a human athletically. I'm glad I'm peaking as a human in business and in leadership and in training others and being able to give that back. So
yeah, you don't know where your peak is until you push yourself. And, we're learning that with all we're doing right now. Yeah. So I know we're running late. So I think this is a great topic. We'll circle back on more, personal development things. I've got a lot of ideas, and Dave's got a lot of keys like the 7 keys we went over today. But there's other things on leadership and other personal development that we can dig into. Yeah,
and I think the big takeaway for everybody is self-reflection. And these are 7 great prompts in self-reflection. And if you use them actively and regularly, you'll learn about yourself. And it's probably the most important thing you can do is learn about yourself.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. That's Paradigm Playbook.
Make it a great day, guys.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share, subscribe, reach out to us, give us a call. If you want to come on the show, don't hesitate. We love guests.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. Visit ParadigmPlaybook.com to discover how we can support you and your business.